The World War III dream happened in February and March 2012 and was the last of a series of dreams I experienced across the previous 6 months or so. I'd been living in a 3-bedroom apartment with my ex. At that time, the relationship had ended and we were getting divorced. It was definitely the right thing to be doing. During that time, I'd been experiencing an increasing sense of disorientation. The apartment was sunlight and cream right next to the city, overlooking the park beside the building. I really liked living there and I stayed on alone afterwards for several months, even running into debt, because it was so much privacy and sanctuary as I regathered a sense of personal freedom and creative self. I was feeling a kind of grief and disconnection, and a mixture of some unusual dreams which had happened in Germany when I had visited there with my ex for Christmas the year before was still quite fresh to mind. In Germany, some of those experiences could have been exacerbated and brought about by the extended fast I had been undergoing in order to fit into my wedding suit for a ceremony we would have in Germany. However, one dream was unmistakable and coherent and occurred before we had travelled to Germany. Earlier, in November that year, I had dreamed of being somewhere I'd never been to before. Everything had a clean light to it despite the fact it was evening, and the well-kept back garden had green grass and evergreen trees. I could describe the paving and patio, a mixture of cement and red brick forming terraces and bordering the garden, and the wide glass windows and the warm open wooden kitchen. There was a wide shared pathway behind the house, which was paved by white concrete and had large overhanging trees, and my wife was there with me. When I told my ex about this dream at the time, I do not think she paid any notice. I had mentioned to her I did not think that place I had dreamed of was Germany, at least for our upcoming trip, because there was no snow there. In my imagination, it would be snowing in the winter, and I would say that my ex-wife encouraged that idea because she loved the snow at winter, and it was part of the vision of her hometown in East Germany that it would snow. On that Christmas night when we were in Germany, we arrived at her uncle's house, and to my amazement, it was the exact place I had dreamed about. It had not snowed in time for Christmas, but it did snow later. I was overexcited and slightly astonished about dreaming this moment, and when I pointed it out to her, a family member was listening and she became understandably embarrassed. Later she would scold the idea I could have ever dreamed of that place. Like she said to me in her very German way, "That's impossible," even though other Germans would never have thought of her as German unless they were from Berlin. It was not the first time I had dreamed of a vision of the future which subsequently came true. This kind of dreaming is a part of my life. When I was in Germany, a part inside of me began to feel a coldness and also like a black smear. Perhaps this had increased the sense of disorientation I was experiencing after returning to my homeland, which was very hot in contrast. It was so very cold in Germany. I'd found the entire sense of land there so different. I also experienced a moment travelling from the forest into my ex-wife's home city of an ancient king's awareness lying within the earth, whose shield stretched over him and onto the land. Some aspects of this now which make sense to me because it could have been a distant ancestor, although the main line of my family tree came from Scotland. At that time it commingled with the coldness in my bones. The city in Germany had been completely leveled during World War II. All the buildings there had been rebuilt, aside from the parts of the church in the old city centre. I had not expected this fact, nor initially recognised it. During our time there, my ex had pointed out a square building made with similar dichotomy to the rest of the place, which used to be surrounded by barbed wire until the 80s, with UK soldiers and M16 machine rifles. And I did not really understand why this left her so perturbed. After all, I had learned enough from the way she described both her schooling and her culture. A historical shift had occurred to her country after the Second World War. However, I subsequently experienced a dream which contributed to that cold feeling inside myself. And the next day, in my ex-wife's mother's apartment, I'd researched about those things which had happened in that town during World War II, and it made sense. In this dream, which itself did not go for very long, it was very dark in the night. The night here itself was very dark, and it was cold, bleeding a cold darkness. I felt myself to be 16 years old. There were soldiers running through the crumbled remnants of the city, but they were only shadows. I stood with some comrades. I'd been wearing a long dark overcoat and a peaked cap which was also dark. We were moving circumspectly through rubble and empty streets, but I did not really know what was happening. I had a fairly solid and cruel-shaped knife that was made for cutting people, which I clasped closely with my right hand. Some kind of tearing blackness wove through that shadowland. The little fires burned like red sears in the corners, and flashes of light from gun muzzles came like expressions of some macabre carnival, and tore into me. Then I fell into the jumbled rubble, and the crumbled mess of bricks and broken earth and bedraggled weed, and into the jet blackness of shadows. It was a short life. There was little known or remembered, past the childhood of brown evenings and fields of grasses and flowers in the summer. There was only the war and growing up within it, sparse hunger and coldness of mornings, and the last and one only opportunity to strike at those who had brought death, not only to those people around him, that had destroyed the very fabric of his life, each street therein along the houses and gardens amongst his childhood memory. When I awoke from this dream, I felt really disturbed. Because I was on vacation and not doing very much, I probably had more time to dwell in my head than as usual. The other dream I had in Germany, a few days later, was of someplace else, and whilst I can't explain how one may get there, I do know in a way precisely where it is.